GDP down, unemployment up. Deflation, by the way, happened over the course of about 4 years, from 1929 to 1933. What we just saw happened over 4 weeks. So even if the declines and the shock is comparable order of magnitude, which it is, the time compression is unlike anything we've ever seen. You can't, wars are pretty horrendous, but you can't even compare it to a war. So things that played out over multi-year spans had played out in a couple of weeks. What that means is that, you can read the headlines, you can do the estimates, you can listen to the analysts and listen to what I'm saying now. Say, I got it. That's going to be pretty bad. But people have not internalized this. People don't, they may know it at some abstract level, but their lives, their lifestyles have not been radically changed as of this minute, but they will be. 10 million Americans have lost their jobs in the last 3 weeks. 10 million. 10 million, right. So that by itself would take the unemployment rate well past 10%, which is the peak of where it was in 2008. Or in 1982, we had a bad recession. It also peaked around 10%. It's going to 25%. Businesses are hanging on. And bear in mind that our economy was weak before the coronavirus. All this happy talk from the White House about the greatest economy in U.S. history. It's all nonsense. I mean, the economy was growing. The U.S. was outperforming other developed economies. We were doing better than our trading partners. But growth was 11-year growth from 2009 to 2020 was about 2.2%. And the annual figures clustered around that. We had no 3% years. We had no recession years after June 2009. It was very much around 2.2%. It was the same under Trump as Obama. The economy looked about the same. Trump didn't mess it up, but he didn't, double the growth rate of Obama. Those economies looked about the same, which tells you that there were forces at play that had nothing to do with the public policy or personality of the president. It had to do with demographics, debt, technology, other forces, if you will, high debt to GDP ratios that were actually more powerful than a specific public policy. So we were weak going into this. The Fed, until the end of 2018, had been raising rates. The Fed, over the course of 2018, had been burning money. Everyone, they used to run into people, they say, I'm sick of the Fed printing money. I say, sorry, they stopped printing money in 2014. They were burning money. They were reducing the money supply from 4.5 trillion to about 3.8 trillion on their balance sheet between late 2017 and mid 2019. So the Fed was in a double tightening mode, raising rates and reducing the money supply. Now, of course, that's all out the window. Rates are back to zero, where the balance sheet today, the Fed's balance sheet today, is $5 trillion. That's higher than it was at the peak of QE3, which was around $4.5 trillion. So the balance sheet's bigger. There's more money in circulation, and interest rates are lower than they were a couple of years ago. The Fed was trying to get back to normal. And I said all along that in their effort to get back to normal, meaning 4% interest rates and the balance sheet of about $2 trillion, they would cause the recession they were preparing to cure. In other words, why were they trying to normalize the balance sheet and interest rates? Well, they wanted to get ready for the next recession. They didn't see this coming. I mean, practically no one did, but they knew it would come eventually, and they were preparing for it. But I said they would fail. They would not achieve their goals before they encountered a crisis of some kind, which would force them to retreat. And that is exactly what happened beginning at the end of 2018. Powell first said, okay, I'm done raising rates. And everyone said, well, that's good. Then he said, well, now I'm actually going to cut rates. And I said, well, that's good. And then they said, we're going to abandon our quantitative tightening. And we weren't going to print money, but we were going to stop reducing the money supply. People said, that's good. By the way, that's what drove the stock market up in 2019. Yeah. The Fed kept giving the market candy until along comes coronavirus. So we had weak growth. The stock market was overvalued. We were uniquely unprepared for what has happened. So the idea that a strong economy took a beating is false. A weak economy took a beating, worse than the Great Depression, and now we have to go forward from here. So the idea that the stock market is somewhere near a low, negative interest rates are on the horizon. this depression. I don't call it a recession. It's not a recession. It's a depression, which is far worse. Let's see how long it lasts and what the damage is. But that's what we're in. And that has people kind of, you can say it, you can read it, but people haven't lived it. The expression you hear right now is pent-up demand. Well, okay, we're all staying home. No one's going out to a restaurant or whatever. But once the doors are open and the virus is contained, we're all going to be running out, and that pent-up demand. So, no, this is a timing difference. Second quarter will be worse. Third quarter, maybe fourth quarter will come roaring back, and you get your V-shaped recession. That's nonsense. It reminds me of 2009, 2010. I remember, you were around, I was around. We heard the expression, at least in the U.S., green shoots. Everyone was, commenting, here come the green shoots. Look at the green shoots. That was nonsense. They were brown weeds. They weren't green shoots. In other words, we got 2.2% growth for 10 years or 11 years, but the average recovery since 1980 is 3.2%. We got 2.2%. So, and if you think 1 percentage point doesn't sound like a lot, it is. Take 1 percentage point times a $20 trillion economy compounded over 10 years yields $4 trillion in lost wealth. That's how much wealth we left on the table by not being able to get back to the old trend. We did grow, but it was depressed growth, and which is one definition of a depression. Now, the problem now is that where's this so-called pent-up demand? So my wife and I usually go out for dinner on a Friday night, which we do. We did not go out last Friday. We're not going out this Friday. May not go out for a while, but let's just say that by August, things are back to normal. We decide to go out for dinner. We're not going to order 10 dinners. We're going to order one. We're going to sit there and have dinner. Those other 9 dinners that we skip, that is lost output, permanently lost output. It's not a timing difference. Now, it's true that if I were going to buy a car last week and I chose not to because the dealer's closed, and I go out in August and buy the car, okay, that's a timing difference. We subtract it from second quarter GDP, add it to third quarter GDP. So that could be pent-up demand, so-called. So that is a timing difference. So then what you have to do to analyze future growth, you say, okay, well, of everything that's going on, how much are permanent losses and how much are temporary losses, timing differences? Well, 70% of the U.S. economy is consumption, and about 60% of that are services, not goods, meaning 42% of the entire economy is consumption of services, bars, restaurants, theaters, concerts, shows, movies, etc. And most of that, as I described, is lost permanently. So you're never going to get that back. And then the question is, how do you grow from there? Well, here, let's say you're a restaurant and you have 20 employees. Now your doors are shut. You've terminated all 20 of your employees. They're applying for unemployment, so they're getting some check from the government, but you've closed your business. You're hanging on because most of these kinds of small businesses are not well capitalized anyway. They don't have a lot of working capital. By the way, 42% of the jobs in the U.S. are small businesses. It's not, IBM and General Electric. It's restaurants, dry cleaners, pizza parlors, and the like. Okay, so now let's say it's all clear. The virus is contained. You reopen your restaurant. Are you going to hire back all 20? Or will you perhaps say, well, I'll hire back 10 and we'll see about the other 10? You're going to have the same crowd? No, because behavior changes. You're going to have to set up fewer tables because they're going to have to be further apart. In other words, you're not going to recover all that lost growth, and 10 of those people are not going to get their jobs back. This is for the ones who hang on. There will be a lot of bankruptcies in the meantime. People just say, well, sorry, I'm just closing up shop permanently. I'm not reopening this restaurant. And so when you take into account the permanently lost output because it's gone, it doesn't come back. You don't have the 10 dinners as I described, plus the permanently lost jobs where you get terminated for reasons we all understand right now, but you don't get hired back for a lot of other reasons. This is depression-like characteristics. So will we grow again? Yes. Will we hit bottom? Yes. But we're going to hit bottom maybe 30%. I mean, I always talk about this all the time in terms of hedge fund performance. When you're down 30%, and then you go up 50%. Well, that's 50% of 70, which is only 35. I mean, the math doesn't work in reverse in terms of. Let's say we went down 30%, which seems likely. Let's say we had 10% growth. I've never seen 10% growth in a quarter in the United States. I've looked at a lot of time series. The biggest quarter I saw was during the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s. We had one quarter where the economy grew 8%. We had a couple of years in the run. The economy grew 5-6%. That's what a strong economy looks like, 5-6%.
Yeah.
Well, let's say we go down 30%, and it could be worse, but let's say 30. So now we're at 70. Okay, 70% of the former GDP, and we grow 10%, which is off the charts. Well, that's 7. Now you're at 77. Guess what? You're still 23 percentage points below the prior level of GDP. You grow 10% again. I'll add 7.7 more. Now you're up to 84. And you're still 16% below the prior GDP. This could go on, will go on for quarter after quarter. That's if you get the kind of growth I just mentioned, which is unlikely for the reasons I talked about earlier. So it doesn't mean we don't hit bottom. It doesn't mean we never grow. What it means is that we don't get back to those levels for years. Reduce your exposure to equities. I'm not saying go to zero, but stock markets have not hit bottom. Number one, build up a store of cash. People turn up their nose at cash. You go, well, it has no yield. Well, it doesn't go down 30% either, or 50%. But first of all, cash does increase in value in deflation. When you have deflation, I'm not talking about disinflation, I'm talking about deflation, which is coming. The value of cash actually goes up. Your dollar buys more as prices go down. So your